Let's go, Manny. Take it away.
Well, there was a lot of speculation of how Spence was going to look, and I think he proved that there's nothing wrong with him, and that accident was just a blip in the screen, and 14 months healed him, and it was really only just superficial facial wounds that he suffered, and he looked spectacular. And an amazing jab, great fakes, amazing pivoting, amazing footwork, amazing distance, and he controlled the entire fight, in my opinion.
Yep. And I think Garcia was I think in the beginning he got frustrated. Because there was a time where he fell down, like I think it was round one or two. He fell down, and then he was bent over at a 90-degree angle, and Spence had him hugging him, and bang bang bang. And I think he got frustrated, and it was hard for him to get up. And then his dad in the ring's going, "Yeah, you come on, you got to do better. You got to do better." I'm like,
What does that mean? Very technical in terms of the way Spence was able to pivot over, and then Garcia didn't even know if he was on his left hand side or his right hand side at times, and it really frustrated him. Yeah, he used just amazing jabs, and how he'd step up like nothing would be happening, and all of a sudden Spence would throw like two quick right jabs and a left hand, and out of nowhere, and it really surprised Garcia. And Garcia just couldn't get the tempo, couldn't get the pace, and wasn't able to be in the fight, really.
yeah. This is Garcia's third attempt for the world title,
Correct.
I
Yeah, he
believe.
lost to
Yeah.
Porter, and he lost to Keith Thurman.
Yeah, man, yeah. You know what? I mean, it was kind of lackluster on his part. I thought. I mean, he was tough, but he just needed to. He needed to hit, and he needed to move, and he needed to just stay busy, and he
And
wasn't
stay
busy
pressure.
enough. I
Like
mean, he'd
his
get in there and like, oh, and then weave it underneath, and it was like, fucking throw something, man, throw something. Then yeah, there was times where he didn't throw shit. Yeah.
Yeah, true. No, nothing, not taking anything away from
Oh no, exactly. Yep, yep,
Garcia.
yep.
Really, like he was in the fight, but
Hmm.
just one step behind Spence. And Spence, his defense is it's hard to penetrate it. He's impenetrable, and I mean Garcia just couldn't maintain any sort of constant pressure on him, and it would, partly had to do with Garcia not really wanting to go forward. But I wouldn't want to go forward if I was missing, and then if the guy was standing on my left hand side or right hand side, and they didn't know where he was.
Exactly. He was everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
and he controlled the ring. I mean, Spence definitely controlled the ring.
Oh yeah, he
I
was.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, Spence was. I mean, Garcia was. I mean, he was great. He was tough, but when you're going against guys that are world class caliber and world champions like that, you got to step it up. I don't
Yeah.
think he stepped it up at all.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, Earl Spence has the pedigree. I mean, he was in the 2012 Olympics for the USA, and he got to the quarterfinals. So it's in his blood. It's what he does, man. He was born to do it. Not to say Garcia,
Mm.
he was sort of in his blood as well. His dad got him into it when he was really young, and from Puerto Rico, and it's all he's ever really done. But he didn't attain the amateur status that Earl Spence did, and I think that makes a bit of a difference to the pedigree of the fighter.
Hmm. Yeah, the resilience, man. That's what the title was tonight. Resilience, and
Yeah,
I don't think
resilience.
the car wreck didn't fuck with him.
The big fight is Terrence Crawford and Earl Spence if they can ever make that fight. The only problem is the management. Like Earl Spence is with Al Heyman in the PBC Prime Boxing Championship, and Terrence Crawford is still with Bob Arum, but there's talk that he wants to get out of that contract.
Hmm.
So if he's able to do that, they might be able to make that fight. But if if Terrence Crawford can't get out of the grip of Bob Arum, that fight will probably never be made, because why would Bob Arum want to risk Terrence Crawford not being able to beat Errol Spence, right? It's unfortunate that that's what it's come to, but it's a lot different than the UFC, that they basically control all the top fighters. In boxing, they got certain promoters that control certain fighters, and certain promoters don't want to put their best guys in against another promoter's best guy, because then their meal is basically going to be gone if they lose.
How good is Spence? I when I see Terrence Crawford fight, right? I see
Yeah.
that the switch hitting, right? To me, that's something I've never seen before, right? But does he really pose a threat to Terrence Crawford?
I think he does pose a threat because he's a very consummate professional. He's very hard to hit. Like he has a real high guard, and it's very hard to penetrate him. And I think he'd be a tough opponent for anyone because he's got such good lateral movement, like Jerry was saying, and he's here and he's there, and he's got great distance. He's got good pivots. He's got good angles, and I mean, he would give anyone a difficulty. So even like some of the greatest welterweights, such as Roberto Duran or Sugar Ray Leonard or Thomas Hearns, he would give anyone historically a real tough time. Whether he'd be able to beat those type of guys, I'm not really sure, but I'd love to see a Terrence Crawford. I hope Terrence Crawford can get out of the jam that he's in with Bob Arum and fight the best like he says he wants to do. Did you guys notice how Danny Garcia's gloves seemed so much smaller than Errol Spence's gloves? Did you guys notice that? Like those purple gloves he had on, didn't they look small?
Yeah, they definitely did.
And that's really, it's a weird thing because the Reyes boxing glove, they have a lot of the padding on the wrist, right? And not as much on the knuckles, because the boxing glove goes by the weight of the glove. It doesn't necessarily mean that the weight has to be on the padded knuckle part, where like the gloves, like he had Everlast gloves, Errol Spence, and they tend to be pretty small gloves too. But the Grant gloves have a lot of padding on the knuckles, and that's why like Floyd Mayweather mostly wore Grant gloves, because he had like his hands were very tender, and they didn't want to break them, so he wanted the padding on
brittle
the knuckles,
hands, right?
So fighters, brittle hands, so fighters can choose the glove that they want to wear nowadays, where back in the day, if you see the picture behind me here, Joe Frazier and Muhammad Ali, they both had Everlast. You never got to choose. But even back when I was boxing, we never got to choose the gloves. They assigned us gloves, and they were always the same make of glove. Whereas this is a more recent thing in boxing, where the fighters are actually able to choose the glove that they want to wear. And some are considered puncher gloves. Others are considered more, like blocking gloves or to save your hands, right?
I remember that was a thing in the Conor McGregor Mayweather fight about horsehair in the gloves.
With gloves.
Can you explain that? And Jerry, maybe touch on that with the kickboxing world. But yeah, Manny, what is that about? Yeah,
I'm not really sure. I think Floyd was trying to just ramble up some what's the word? Some controversy about, Connor's going to get these gloves. I'm not going to let him wear those gloves because they're not
mind games
sanctioned and this and that. Yeah, mind games basically. And I mean, Floyd, it wouldn't have mattered because Connor, I'm 100% convinced that Floyd he played for 10 rounds until he wanted to stop him, and he stopped him, and he just wanted to make a game of it. He just wanted to. Very similar to what happened with the Tyson Roy Jones match. I can almost guarantee you Mike Tyson could have taken Roy Jones out a lot. If he went to started throwing those body shots to the head, Roy wouldn't have been able to sustain that. And the same thing with Floyd. He was just playing with Conor in my eyes.
Yeah, the gloves in the kickboxing world, you didn't get to choose your gloves. They chose the gloves for you.
Simple as that. So no,
but you know what? Maybe nowadays it might be different, Jerry. I don't know, because we competed way back in the day, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I don't know. I do movies now.
yeah, exactly. But I know in boxing, it's a recent phenomenon that the boxers get to choose the gloves that they want to wear.
Freaking, yeah.
And they always have two gloves, because you have to pick the gloves you're going to wear into the ring, and then you have to pick your backup glove in case it's ripped. Yeah. Because if you remember back in, I think it was 1964, Muhammad Ali was fighting Henry Cooper in Wembley Stadium, and Muhammad Ali came back to the corner, and Angelo Dundee, his brilliant trainer, he saw a little tear in the glove of Muhammad Ali, and he had to investigate. Like he couldn't. He just had to know how bad that tear was. But we got to remember that in the fourth round, Muhammad Ali got knocked down by Henry Cooper. Like he was put on his ass with a left hook, and he didn't know where he was when he came back to the corner. So Angelo saw that little rip, and he just investigated and put his finger in it. And guess what? The rip got really big, so he couldn't fight with the gloves. So they had to look for another glove. But they didn't have a glove at ringside, because at that time they didn't have that rule that you had to have a backup pair of gloves. So they spent minutes, 3 or 4 minutes looking for gloves. They couldn't find gloves, and guess what? They just let him continue with the ripped glove. But it bought Muhammad Ali like 4 or 5 minutes of extra time to recuperate from that knockdown. That could have changed history, because had Henry Cooper been able to get right out there after 1 minute, he may have been able to finish Muhammad Ali, and it would have really changed history. But who knows?
That's true.
I just want to ask about your thoughts on the co-main. That guy, 6'5", eh? Super tall.
He looked a freak, eh? Sebastian Fundora.
Ooh.
He's going to be a hard guy to beat by anybody, really. That uppercut, eh, Jerry? Did you see that?
His uppercut.
Quick uppercut.
It's funny because I saw the guy and I went, "Oh my God, look how skinny his legs are."
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
Yes, he was like a toothpick. But when he started punching him, going, "What the fuck?" Yeah, the uppercut. Yeah, and Ahmed, he needed to get inside, and he was too frustrated. Yeah, I mean, come on, he was 6'6", was 6'5". Yeah, 6'5", 6'6". Yeah. Fighting somebody like that, yeah, you can't stay on the outside. You got to get on the inside, and if you don't, yeah, you're pretty much screwed.
How do you guys feel when you watch a boxing? You're a kickboxer, but when you watch a boxing fight or an MMA fight, and then Manny, how do you feel when you watch an MMA fight or a kickboxing fight? Right, so the ones you didn't participate in, what's that like? Is it? Yeah, tell us.
There's something inside of you that's kind of. It kind of moves, and you're like, oh fuck, like you put yourself in that position, and you kind of move, and you kind of think, you see this opening, you see that opening, you see that shot, and you're like, oh fuck, he should have done that. Oh wow, I would have done that. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting thing. I find myself looking and thinking, well, I wouldn't have done that. I would have done that. Oh yeah, that was nice, and being impressed by certain things. But I just say, I think, what would I have done? And I do that quite a bit. Yeah, like tonight, it's all the fights. I was like, my wife's coming in, she's like, wow, wow, honey, oh God, okay, well, you enjoy yourself. And I'm like, she's like, you look a little tense. And I'm like, no, honey, I'm just watching the fight. Get out of here. I'm like, I'm into the fight, honey. I'm a fighter. Yeah. But yeah, I put myself into it and think what I would do, and heart starts getting a little, pounded a little bit. Yeah, it's interesting.
I totally agree with Jerry. Your heart starts beating a little differently while you're watching a match, but like I could say, like, I'm an armchair quarterback. I mean, you can't expect to get back in there the same. The reflexes aren't the same. Yeah. And it's fun. It's fun to sort of critique things and watch things, and but that's why I give so many props to guys like a guy like George Foreman, that came back at like 48, and now that Mike Tyson, even though it wasn't really a complete comeback, and now he's just going to want to do exhibitions, but you got to give him props, man, because to do what he does he's getting out there and putting himself out there to do it. And but I mean, yeah, just brings back a lot of memories for me, really. And I mean, it's fun to watch, and just to really understand how these guys must feel, because like Jerry and I have been through it, and when you're digging deep into the later rounds, and how you're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, like this is really getting to me, or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different feelings that come through there.
Yeah, what Lopez and Santana? Those guys were in their 30s. They were like 30, 36, I think.
38. Yeah. I think Josecito Lopez was 38 years old, and he's fought Canelo. He's fought all the great fighters.
Fought Thurman too.
And Thurman, yeah.
Oh my God.
Roberto Garcia is his trainer, and he's a really good trainer. He's trained a lot of good fighters, and I think he might have one more go. Like, I mean, he's not in the same league as Errol Spence or anything, but maybe as a fringe contender, he can do something.
How old were you when you retired, Manny?
Oh, I was younger. Like, I'm not that young, but I mean, my last match was in 2001, so that would have made me 33 because I was born in '68.
Okay, wow.
And you, how old were you, Jerry?
28, man. 28, I retired. My last fight was 1980, 89.
Young.
Yeah, 89. I was like, okay, yeah.
That's when I was born.
I know it.
Yeah, I'm the oldest guy here. Well,
We don't get the fights that we want in boxing. Is it because there's too many belts? What's going on here? Like, why is that the case? And do you think that attributes to the fact that UFC has become so popular now, right?
Well, I think the main reason is because promoters don't want to lose their bread and butter fighters. So, like I was saying earlier, Bob Arum doesn't want to lose Terrence Crawford because he can put Terrence Crawford on a main event on one of his cards and he'll sell, right? Because he's the champion at that weight class. But so is Errol Spence. And Errol Spence is with Prime Boxing Championship. It's a guy named Al Heyman.
Yeah.
And Al Heyman doesn't necessarily want to do the same thing, so they want to keep their bread and butter fighters that they can promote
Yeah.
and make money off of. Maybe not as much money as if they fight each other at that particular time, but they'd rather make 5-10 million over 5 fights than make 15 million in one fight, but then lose their guy, their money guy. I think that's the main reason. And it doesn't have so much to do with the boxers. It mostly has to do with their management and their promoters.
Do you think there's too many belts?
There's way too many belts.
Yeah,
but
right.
Nowadays, the fights aren't really necessarily contested they're contested for the belts. You got to pay the sanctioning fee, and it's for this belt or that belt. But it's more name recognition. It's more like Canelo Alvarez doesn't have to have a belt. People will go watch him fight, right? Neither does what's another good fighter? Like a Tyson Fury doesn't need any belts, even though he's got all the not all of them. What's his name? Anthony Joshua's got one of the belts too, but Tyson Fury, top heavyweight guy, like everyone's gonna want to see him because he's undefeated and no one's beating him. So he's the guy. He's the go-to guy.
I hear all the time, boxing's corrupt or the blah 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 blah. Like, is there validity to that, or is that just kind of complainers that a talking point?
I've never seen a fixed match in terms of that, like being corrupt that way. I've never seen it. I know that apparently there was back in the day, like when Jake Mata was fighting and the mob was involved in New York. I heard back then stories that the mobsters used to bet on the fights, so they bet big money, right? So they had to pay off certain guys to get what they wanted. But nowadays, I've never heard of the fight being fixed.
But how about in the sense of the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder first fight? It was so judges, right? Judges getting it wrong or kind of being too generous for the wrong guy.
I have heard of envelopes changing hands, like certain envelopes changing hands to certain judges, or vacations to here or there. I'll get your wife. You and your wife should go to Jamaica for a week, and but you remember who my guy is, right? So I've heard stuff like that going on, and it's unfortunate that it happens, but it happens in any sort of judgmental or any sort of sport that has judging in it, like diving or gymnastics or anything. There's always going to be, people that, see it one way and someone sees it the other way. And there's going to be a lot of reasons why they might see it that way. And some of those reasons might be that they're being influenced by certain people. And so I'm sure that happens. But the great thing about boxing, there's the ultimate equalizer. And that's the KO. So you KO a guy, they can't rip you off. The Cleveland Medical Clinic, what they're trying to do is find out, the real impact of brain injury and pugilistic dementia. And they're coming up with new ways of figuring out, because the only time they can find out if you have CBT or CIT or something.
CTE.
Like the brain thing is once you die and they cut your brain open, right? But now apparently they're coming up with new tests that they can sort of detect it by depending on how much of a hormone called tau is in your bloodstream or something like that. So they're trying to develop new things, but what they're trying to do is they got a bunch of ex-boxers that they're using as tests that we go down there once a year and they run a bunch of tests like MRIs. Eventually, when we pass away, they're going to get our brains and they're going to try to figure out why some people are affected by dementia or Alzheimer's and other people were not.
Wow. I find myself when these guys get hit, and like today when Santana was.
Oh yeah, that's Santana.
I felt sorry for the guy when I see these guys getting their brains beat in.
And their eyes are kind of out of the
Oh
way. And then,
man, I feel.
you see when he started pawing? He started pawing at the back of his head.
It's really weird because he was doing. It was like, I thought it was a prayer.
I don't know. I
thought it was a prayer. I thought he was like, it was weird. Yeah, but I felt for the guy. I felt really bad for him.
I know. I did as well. In boxing amateur boxing in Canada in 1991, they used to allow 2 boxing matches in amateur boxing a day. And then in 1991, a boxer by the name of Greg Johnson was boxing a boxer from British Columbia named Ron Paskey. And Ron Paskey had won a real tough fight earlier in the day, like at 1 PM. And in the evening, he fought Greg Johnson. And Greg Johnson was a real puncher, and Greg knocked him out. And Ron never really woke up after that. And he's still alive today in a wheelchair, and he got a real bad brain injury. But it just sort of goes to show, like, the more punches you take, like, you don't know which one's going to do the damage, right?
Exactly.
Like Ron, he was always taking punches, and then he got hit by Greg, and then he had a brain bleed, and it it pushes the cerebellum all the way down through your spine and stuff like that, and everything starts to go, like your hearing and your sight, and Ron, that's what happened to Ron, right? He can't hear, can't see, and he's in a wheelchair, and but he's still alive apparently.
Jerry Quarry was like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jerry, me and some a producer buddy of mine who was one of his trainers, we were going up to see him to talk about doing a story on his life, and oh my God. But he's like, the guy's like, hey, Jerry, show him your hook, man, and he would like, whoom, and he'd throw a hook and the whole room would shake. He's like, oh yeah, but he couldn't talk, he couldn't communicate. But it was like he was in there and he was trying desperately. Major pugilistic dementia. So sad to see him like that.
I mean, he fought the best. He fought Joe Frazier. He fought Foreman. He fought everybody. But he took so many hard shots.
He took so many hard shots, man. God, he was a bleeder. But they couldn't stop him. He just kept coming and kept coming.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
If they could find a way to, I don't know what way but the best way would, like, I mean, there's no way around it, I don't think.
Yeah, I was telling Vente last week that I got parents coming up to me going, you know what, my son wants to get into martial arts. They want to do the MMA, the fighting. They want to fight for professionally, and I'm like, why? I don't know. Being that I've been in that I don't know. We got to take care of this, and you just, like you said, you just don't know. It could be one shot. It could be accumulation of shots. It's a weird thing, man.
Yeah, it is. But it's such a, it's such a beautiful sport just the same when you see a guy, land the shot and step out of the way. And, but, I keep saying, like, in the 80s and 90s didn't really know about it, but now we all know about it. Like, there's some great fighters coming up, and they're coming, hey, everyone's got to take their dream. Everyone's got to develop their dream and do what they got to do. But it's not just in boxing. It's hockey the same when the guys are taking these checks into the boards and their brains are going, like, they're pushing forward and coming back and getting shaken up. So it's any sort of sport like that. And, especially football, right? The head-on hits now they don't allow, and all sorts of things like that.